Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It's your Capes Crusader, Cody, and we are keeping it geekly with our new friend, Josh Wilson. We're here to break down Twilight, Custard, and everything in between. Josh, welcome to the stream. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing so well. Thank you, Cody, for having me.
Dude, I was so stoked backstage. We learned that we're both from Ohio. It's always like, you know, I love interviewing, but when I get the friends from Ohio, it's like that added sense. It's like, yes, dude, like hitting home. Let's go.
Yeah, especially we're pretty close. So that's pretty crazy.
Don't throw it away. Yeah. So, let's get down to who you are. How'd you end up getting into indie comics?
So it's kind of a long story that I've been trying at each interview to like shorten and just keep the interesting bits. So we'll see how I've done. But essentially, I'm a writer first and foremost. So it started a long time ago with like music, and then it moved to film scripts. And then I tried to start shooting like short films and things like that. And then COVID happened, and I've had all these different writings and such. And I was like, I should really turn these into, because I've always been a fan of comics. So I was like, I'll turn these into comics, because no one's gonna, I've got a drawer full of movie scripts that no one's gonna read. So it's like turn them into visuals. So it's kind of like, I don't know if people think about this or not, but when you're making a movie, you storyboard out the script first. And so honestly, you're just stopping there and you're creating a comic book out of that. And so that's where Twilight Custard came from. It was a movie script first. And then I've since gone and written comics scripts specifically because I really love the medium. It's really creative. It's less of a, it's a smaller collaboration than film would be. And so it's just oftentimes myself and an artist and a colorist and a letterer, and we are able to make these stories come to life without, hundreds of thousands of dollars of budget, especially for sci-fi stuff, So it really started, about 2019 when I started to get serious about it.
For anyone watching, right there is the Twilight Custard pre-launch page. Be sure to hit that with a follow. We're currently sitting at 61 follows. I'd like to at least see that hit 70, but if we can get 65 by the end of the interview, that'd be awesome, guys. So make that happen.
That'd be amazing.
I'm curious, tell us a little bit about some of those scripts. Were they all sci-fi, or did you venture off into different genres?
Yeah, so movie scripts in general, I've done a lot of like dramedy is like my favorite. So like you'll see a lot of my comics. This one's a little bit more serious, but I like to add humor to it too, to kind of serious situations. If I can make someone in my art laugh and cry, especially, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. But since I've gone into comics, it has gravitated pretty heavily towards sci-fi. There's a series that I'm working on a pitch for now that's, I don't know if you'd maybe call it more fantasy than sci-fi, but there's always some kind of fantastical thing going on. And I think that lends itself to the visuals. I actually, I love comic books like Essex County and Blankets and Underwater Welder, things like that don't really have too much of a fantastical, like they're just straight up drama. So, maybe in the future I'll play with that too. But for me, like if you're able to come up with anything you want visually, it's fun to just get wild sometimes.
Yeah, you mentioned that you grew to really loving the comic script compared to the movie script. But like, what were some of the other elements that really drew you to scripting comics from movies?
Just being able to explain exactly what I want to see on a page and on a panel, and then having one of the artists that I'm collaborating with realize that. It's just really wonderful to be able to just direct essentially every single piece that you're seeing. With moving images, you can control only so much. I mean, masters are controlling every single frame, but when it comes down to just visual images on a page, every single thing that you see is something that I dreamt up and had created. So that's just, I love that process.
It had to be such a surreal feeling, like getting the first couple pages back and seeing it come to life.
Yes, absolutely. When you're going online and trying to find artists, it's difficult because there's so many talented artists out there, but each of them have their own styles. And so each project, I think, calls for a different style. And so in my head, I knew with Twilight Custard specifically that I wanted it to be kind of a gritty, hand-drawn, sort of smudgy feel to it. So it kind of harkens back to the time period a little bit. And so I was so lucky to find William. He's just a fantastic artist. And I didn't have to, like I say, direct too much. When he read the script and he sent me back these images, I was like, man, this is exactly what I was picturing. So there wasn't a lot of edits after the fact.
That's awesome. And this is a hefty book too. There is how many pages again?
I think there's about 125, and then there's some extras, so about 136 all total. Yeah.
So is this a one shot, or is this going to be part of a series? Like, what are you looking to do with Twilight Custard?
Twilight, I made a one-shot. So it was written as a movie script. So you can sit down and read through this thing, and it's just like watching a movie. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. If I found a genie and was able to make wishes, I would it would also become a movie after the fact, like a streaming on Netflix kind of thing. And then I have ideas for a second and third installment, but this is very much a standalone story that you'll have a satisfying ending at the end, I think.
So give us a little bit about this creative process. When you first, started taking this from a movie script to a comic script, what did that first, couple steps look like for you?
Yeah, so that was the very first time I'd ever really dealt with comic script in general, because it is quite different from movie script to comic script, just in the formatting alone and such. And so, again, starting with the storyboarding phase, I was just basically taking. Now my process now is much different than when it was converting this into this book. But in that stage, I was just first thinking, what visuals from this story absolutely have to be seen? Mm-hmm. And then I would comprise a list of those, and I would kind of take it along and kind of split it up into what images need to be seen, what makes sense on a page, what do you not want to leave between pages, what makes sense when you have a spread of 1 and 2 pages next together. And so it's all just visually trying to figure out what needs to be seen to tell the story, and then putting the words back on top of that. And I actually had to add some of the monologue from Twilight, because that wasn't in the original movie script, but it needed some more, I think, of his thought process and his feelings added to it as well.
Yeah, I really, really love Twilight as the protagonist as well. I thought his character, and you kind of see, certain parts, he seems like such a cold person, but then you see certain parts where he livens up, and it almost breaks your heart, right? It almost makes you shake your fist with him in certain scenes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wanted him to be two things, essentially. So he suffered a loss before the start of the story that he carries along with him. He's a very sort of stoic, kind of curmudgeon old cowboy fella who lost his wife, and who's just kind of, I think, living out his day to day for the rest of his life, not thinking anything else is going to happen, just kind of honestly waiting to die, essentially, going to work and coming home every day, and that's pretty much it. And then this android crash lands, and he happens to find him, and basically the comparison between the two characters, this all-knowing futuristic android and this curmudgeon old cowboy from the 1800s, I just knew the story between those two and their interactions and their relationships would be interesting, and the way that he could kind of give him purpose to live again. Sometimes you're just kind of, even if you don't want to, you're forced to start doing things that you don't want to do, and it makes you evolve as a person, and then later you look back on it and you're kind of thankful for it.
Yeah, I thought that relationship was so unique, but it just clicked so well. What was some of your inspiration for driving these two together? They seem like two polar opposites almost.
They do, and those are my favorite stories, I mean, this is a terrible comparison because it has nothing to do, but some of my favorite, I love buddy cop movies. Some of my favorite movies are the Rush Hour trilogy. And just when you get two people who are just complete opposites, it's just really fun to hear the banter back and forth. Maybe a more relevant one would be, was it called Hell and High Water, I think, was a bank robbing Western movie that came out not that long ago. Where it's just, again, there's kind of two bank robbers that are brothers, and then there's two cops that are, again, polar opposites and kind of trying to catch them. And so I just love that dynamic. It's one of my favorites, along with androids and AI. So I kind of married the two.
No, I thought it was, and the fact is too, this is an alien from the future, and they're in the 1800s. It's like even more, it's like they've never seen technology, let alone a cell phone or a TV, but this is a whole robot. And
yeah,
exactly. It was just such an interesting situation to put them in. Are you able to kind of give us a little bit more about it? I understand not wanting to spoil, so anything you don't want to talk about, that's completely fine too.
So I'm bad with this because I myself personally don't care about spoilers. I'm somebody that'll listen to a full spoiler podcast about a movie before I see it, but I realize that not a lot of people are.
You watch Filmento?
No, I need to check that out.
Yeah, and then who's the other guy? He does mostly horrors. He has a million of followers though.
Is it
Flicks
YouTube
Explain,
or?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah, YouTube. I always like listening to the 10-minute horror breakdowns. I'm like, all right, I don't have to suffer through this one, because you can never tell which one's gonna be good and which one isn't.
Oh, that is so true, man. There's so much bad horror, and I'm not such a horror fan that I'll watch everything. Like, I love like the kind of heightened, like I just watched Barbarian last night with my wife, which I freaking love. That movie is incredible, but it's just, you never know when you're going into it if it's going to be just awful or not.
Yeah, like Smile just came out, and it's like this. I've read something, and I don't think I've ever read anything more true. They say if it's more hyped, then it's probably not going to be that good. They usually let word of mouth speak for it, like in the beginning, the first couple of days. And Smile was hyped and all hell, you know?
Did you see it? Did you like it?
Yeah. So I liked it. I felt it way too heavy. It was like a jump scare movie and like a shock value movie. So it's like one of those, you know what I mean? Like you watch it the second time, it's not going to nearly hit as good. And then in the movie theater, you have the ambience, the booming music. It frightens you more. So it's hard to say what it'd feel like at home on the couch, you know?
That's a good point, though. Whenever you see a movie studio like just hammering the marketing, it's probably not going to be good. But yeah, I'm trying to think of what I could give as far as the story is concerned. It's just, you know, the background is there's a lot going on in the background. You know, it's the 1800s. It's the border of Texas and Mexico. Texas just got their independence back, so that border is still so volatile. There's so much friction there, and so when I thought this Roswell style incident, this crash kind of spreads debris, something that no one's ever seen across both sides, it just kind of adds to the friction. And so the armies are kind of scrambling over the pieces to see what the hell it is, if they can use it against one another, if the other person has more of it than they do, the paranoia behind that. And that could be a story or a set of stories all on its own. But to me, that's just the background. The story to me is mostly the relationship between this cowboy who happens to find the android pilot, and they strike a deal together to help this android across the Mexican border to the ship, which is being held behind enemy lines in a fort. And so that's what I was interested in writing. And I think that's what is the most interesting about the story is their relationship and what happens with that.
I love in the beginning too, there was the mention where they were talking about the fort, the ambush on the fort, and they were like, well, are they gonna, what's gonna be mentioned of this, or are they gonna pretty much write their own story? And I thought that was a really interesting take. What was some of your inspiration for that? I mean, history is pretty much written by the victor, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I like this kind of alt history. Like, obviously this didn't happen, but the landscape that's there is very real, in that beginning part, I had everything written and figured out, but for several nights, I was so desperate to figure out how to start this thing and how to kick it off that every night I was like, just let me dream. Please let me just dream what will happen at the beginning of this. And finally I had sort of a dream of this attack on this fort and the chasing going on and this stray bullet going through this random house and a scream coming out of that house. And I was like, that is a great way to kind of tell you why Twilight is so sad, why he's so invested, the friction between the war and stuff. So that scene kind of, to me, pulled the whole story and pulled Twilight's whole kind of conflict together to me. So I was thankful to finally have that gifted to me creatively, because I was just not sure how to tie it all together and make it all make sense, But honestly, I think I've told this story a couple times, but I don't think we'll probably have a lot of crossover of listeners. But the story idea came to me from a random band name generator. It gave me Twilight, Custard, and the Busted Deadly, and I held on to it. That's
good though. That is.
I
good.
know, it was so good. I held on to it for 10 years because I was like, I love this. I have no idea what to do with it, but I love it. It obviously wasn't going to be a band name, but finally I just sat down and I just pulled the story apart from this. From that name specifically. So Twilight Custard being the main character and the Busted Deadly becoming the robot that he finds and stuff. And so
I love that so much. That is, I would have never guessed, because I was reading it. I'm like, okay, Twilight. I'm like, Custard. What's the Custard?
Yeah.
So is Custard represent? Is this just his last name, or?
Honestly, it is. There's Colonel Custard from it's not quite spelled quite the same way, but from history. So it's just, that name was just it just made so much sense to me. And it just kind of, like I said, it kind of rings a bell in your mind of some kind of familiarity. But it's just too good to pass up.
So reading this, and once again, thank you for the opportunity for that. I really picked up on some really cool things during the bar fight in particular. The blurring of words, because he wasn't like something was happening and he couldn't register it. So the next speech bubble, the lettering was blurred, and I was like, dude, this is next level. This is such an awesome layer. And then to add to that too, I really love the lack of color, because when you introduce it, it is so impactful. I loved it, man.
Yeah, thank you. How far did you get into the book?
I read roughly halfway, about 55 pages.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because that color comes in basically for the readers. So like it is black and white, and then when the android uses his powers, his main power is being able to project images from the past onto the present, and that is it just fills the page with blue when that happens. And so it starts out where he is calling back a time when Twilight's wife was still alive. And so, it's the middle of the night and this explosion of blue happens, and all of a sudden it's like a spring day and he hears his wife singing in the yard. And so that happens a couple more times in the story when he uses it kind of as a weapon, where, there's another time where they're both stuck in a jail cell, and he projects an image from the past when it was a forest and there's a giant bear there. And so they're able to trick the security guard into thinking that there's actually a bear in the room, or at least like what the hell is going on, for Twilight to be able to knock him unconscious and get them out of the jail. So it comes about a couple times for them to use that power. And that specifically was why I decided to do the black and white with the stretches of blue, is just how can we show this on still images and have it still make sense and be impactful. And that bar scene is another example of that too. I wasn't sure how to make it in a comic book, because I knew visually what it was going to look like in moving pictures, and I knew what the audio was going to sound like with with the android's voice coming through Twilight's mind. And so to write that with the blurred words and the kind of like stuttering of his words as he was kind of coming in and out was challenging to kind of figure out.
No, the thing is, once you did figure it out, the payoff was awesome. I think you just nailed it right on the head. We have J. Michael Miller over on YouTube stopping in to say it has a great cover, and the interiors are just as good. Let's talk about this cover though. What was some of the inspiration for this? That almost looks like a giant Death Star behind him.
I know, right? So yeah, I was so lucky. Chris Allen is an awesome graphic artist friend of mine, and he doesn't do work in comics. He actually works for magazines, and he does some band posters and things like that, or the most of what he's done, t-shirts and stuff, stickers. And I just knew that I wanted it was kind of a fine line, because I didn't want it to look like a comic. I wanted to stand out on the shelf, but I also needed it to look enough like a comic where people would know that that's what it is. But I think that's worked because I put it in a couple of comic shops here locally in Denver, one in Chicago, one in Los Angeles. And the reason I think people are picking it up is because that comic is the cover is so interesting and it stands out from everything else on the rack. It just doesn't look like a comic book to me. It looks to me like a band poster, like a tour photo or something like that. And I kind of just had all the visuals in my mind. I knew I wanted it to be a silhouette of the two. I liked how the android's eyes are cut out so you can see, the color through there. And the setting sun, I wanted to have be the image of the Voyager record. So that's what's printed on the golden Voyager record that they sent off into space.
That's so awesome, dude.
And in the story, they don't flat out say Voyager because, the android doesn't know what that's called. Twilight's never heard of it, but he makes reference of, in the future, you guys are going to send out this probe, then.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's the Voyager record. And so the aliens find it way in the future, and then they send a probe back by bending time and space, and he overshoots, crash lands in the 1800s, it's, aside from where he was supposed to land. And so, yeah, that cover image with the Voyager record is just another kind of Easter egg. If you're, nerdy into space stuff like I am, you'll understand what that means.
We were literally talking backstage, and I remember that part. I was like, dude, I thought that was such an awesome thing, like how you had the message get sent out from our, from Twilight's point, it's in the future. And then the robot comes from like way in the future, but it's in the past for Twilight. I was like, dude, like, what type of math did you have to do there? And then understand that it lines up with the Voyager. That just blew my mind, dude. That is so awesome.
Thanks. I did the best I could. Like I said, napkin math. So, I mean, if you go back, and I didn't use specifics of the exact years and stuff, but I did my best for it to make some sense,
So why a Western though? Out of like any like era you could have chose, like what drove you to this point in time?
It honestly just came from the name and pulling it apart and coming up with that story, just pulling it out of my imagination. And so, again, sci-fi is my favorite genre. AI and robots are my favorite character trope in anything, in any medium, books, movies, anything. And then, I have an appreciation for Westerns, but I'm not like a huge giant fan of Westerns. I don't have like, I've only recently gone back and watched some of the like Fistful of Dollars series and things like that. But I like, kind of the more modern stuff of like even There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men.
I love those.
Yeah, just the kind of feel for it. I mean, that's kind of where Twilight's look and mustache came from, is Daniel Plainview and There Will Be Blood. So,
dude, that was such a powerful move too. Like that, the whole entire movie. Wasn't the one where who was it? Leonardo DiCaprio. He like cut his hand open. He was actually bleeding when he took the
that's
bowling pin.
Django, yeah.
Or was it? Okay, I thought it was with the bowling pin because wasn't there a bowling pin scene?
Bowling pin was in There Will Be Blood, and that's when he beats what's that actor's
Paul Dano.
name? Paul Dano to death. Yeah,
yes.
that's Daniel Day-Lewis. Yep.
Well, two insane roles by Leonardo DiCaprio. I thought that's one where but that was insane too, where he kept going and then wiping the real blood on the face. Like I would have flipped out.
Yeah, he's a good actor, for sure.
But yeah, dude, there Will Be Blood. That was one of my very first introductions. And then after that, Gangs of New York. I'm like, dude, this dude is the bomb. William Day-Lewis is the bomb.
Yeah, if you see Daniel Day-Lewis with a mustache, stand back.
I don't know why I said William.
He's gonna be an asshole for sure if he's got a mustache.
Yeah.
Crazy murdering asshole.
So are we gonna see Twilight turn into any of that? Like, I haven't read the whole thing, but is there potential for him to kind of go off the rails, or is he gonna kind of be the stoic character?
I won't give away because the ending is very cool to me. What ends up happening? I think it takes a couple of turns where you think this is going to happen and then it doesn't. But he has gone through a lot before this story starts, and then towards the end of the story he goes through a lot more, and so he will certainly have some sort of emotional breakdown and kind of be at his wit's end by the end of this thing.
No, I love just with the robot too. Like it just, from what I've read, the robot has it seems like the ability to kind of like keep driving that within him too, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, unintentionally, but yeah, they just have so much friction and just so much lack of understanding of the concepts that the android is throwing at him. He just goes straight over his head, and there's even a line in there where he's just like, you can spare me some of these explanations because I just don't know what you're talking about.
For everyone watching, right here is the pre-launch link once again. Be sure to hit follow and stay notified for that. So what are you looking at in terms of Kickstarter rewards?
Yeah, so if I could just say too, this is my very first Kickstarter, so I don't know if it's going to either be a success or a learning experience. We're going to find out. I hope to do more in the future with a lot of these other projects that I have planned, but essentially, again, this is my very first Kickstarter. It launches tomorrow. Rewards, I've got a lot of cool things. I've got some awesome art prints. I've got some cool pins of the robot that look really, really awesome. I've got a couple of bigger ticket items. I've got a copy of the book here signed by Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes.
Oh, what?
And I've got an art print here signed by signed by Mr. Frodo Baggins there, Elijah Wood. Because I did my first big Comic-Con, and I was like, let me get some souvenirs and pitch these on the Kickstarter. And I gave them each a copy of the book. Who knows if they'll one day read it, but it was really fun really fun to go and do that. So
that's so cool, man.
Yeah, and I tried to price it pretty. It's a graphic novel, so the ones that I was looking at Kickstarter graphic novels were huge amounts of money that I know that I can't get in my first one. So I tried to make it as reasonable as possible as far as my goal. It's only trying to get 1,500. Basically, what I was telling you before is I released this book in January this year and tried to sell as much as I could myself. I sold 200 copies in the first 6 months, and that was all that I printed. And then I kind of stopped from there for a moment. And this is kind of the second phase of what I'm doing with this book. So hopefully recoup some losses with this Kickstarter and get it on some more shelves, some more physical copies on comic book shelves, and also help me get started on some next projects. And then I'm going to also send out some pitches to publishers to see if anybody's interested in that. I know it's hard to pitch a black and white book these days. People want to see color, but it can be done still. So who knows? But yeah, this Kickstarter will have a lot to do with what I'm able to do in the future, how much more successful this book is, and if I'm able to start the next project that I'm excited about as well.
No, absolutely. So speaking of the future, what can we expect from you in the months to come after Twilight Custard? Hoping for a successful campaign. After it successfully funds, what's the next move? Like any other stories? I know you said you had maybe some other ideas with this as well.
Yeah, so again, with this book specifically, getting into more comic book shops and sending out to publishers, I've got 2 pitches that I'm working on. So there's a 5 issue series that I'm working on doing. and I'm creating the pitch document for that right now. I'm getting 6 pages finished of the first issue and going to send out a pitch document to see if anybody bites with that. If no one does bite with that publisher wise, then that will be the next Kickstarter I do, is the first issue of this comic, which I'm really excited about. It's about a young man who wakes up with like the greatest powers in the universe. He's the most powerful being in the entire universe kind of overnight, but he does not at all want the responsibility that comes along with it. So he's like a very much, at the same time, all these evil forces are coming into being. He's the only one that can do anything about it. He's just like basically just so bummed about it because he does not want anything to do with it. So
that would be horrible though, you know? Like,
yeah,
I don't want to deal with this. Like,
yeah, exactly. So I really like, again, most of my writing has to do with character conflict, internal conflict, and things like that. So that's a big part of that. And then I'm working on a big pipe dream of mine, which is another graphic novel that's going to be in full color and probably a lot bigger than this. So I'm going to have some successful crowdfundings to get this going, but it's essentially, and nobody steal this idea because it's my favorite one ever, but it's about it's an android Mr. Rogers type who helps usher humanity through the end of existence. So like
I
this
love
kind
it.
of all empathetic, immortal android character that is with humanity throughout the entire time, all the way to the death of the last human, basically.
You know, I keep seeing this thing on the internet. It's like the last selfie. It's like an AI, like whatever. And it's like a horrifying looking face and a desolated world. And I can't imagine what that android would see at the end of the world, at the end of humanity. It reminds me kind of like, you ever see the Futurama episode where they like keep going forward in time until it stops? It kind of like reminds me of that.
I've seen a lot of Futurama, but I don't know if I've seen that one. I need to.
It's so depressing, right? Like,
yeah, it's never good.
Don't make me cry.
I know. I actually read this thing. I'm gonna butcher it because I don't remember exactly what it said, but it's essentially like a story about a father and son skipping a rock, talking about how fantastical sci-fi ideas are, and the dad was basically explaining how if you get far enough in the future, then people who own these flying cars and these robots thousands of years in the future are going to look back at what we're doing as just skipping a rock on this lake as sci-fi, because you know, essentially every sci-fi, if you get far enough, the world is shit. There's probably not any natural water anymore. Most of the animal life
on mud.
Yeah, exactly. It's just kind of like, yeah, if you get far enough along, it's just not generally very good, unfortunately.
That's such a mind-blowing concept to think about and digest once you really sit there. Holy crap. So, man, this has been such an awesome talk. Thank you for coming on, Josh. And once again, thank you for providing me a copy of Twilight Custard. I can't wait to sit down and finish the rest of it because reading up the first half, I was like, dude, I almost got to get ready for this interview. Like, should I call it off or should I wait 15 minutes? I got to get this thing read.
Well, man, thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for giving me a chance, as I know I'm a new creator, but I know the community is also just very encouraging and welcoming, and so I'm excited to be a part of that and thankful. And I hope that you enjoyed the second half of the book as much as the first. I think you will, because it gets even more crazy. So
let's
you'll have to let me know.
Yeah. So, Josh, before we wrap things up completely, though, I always love ending the show on a strong note, and that's with this, with us really focusing on you and your book, as the main focus. I love having a little bit for anyone who might be new or struggling in watching the show. So with that being said, for anyone who's just having trouble getting going with either the writing or the art or anything in between, what advice would you offer them to help them just get motivated to start?
Of course, yeah. So, I'm kind of right where they are, except for I'm currently doing that. I haven't, this is, without getting too far into the weeds, something that I struggle with and that drives my wife crazy sometimes is that, like, I put a lot of time and effort into making this book, and having the book in my hands and having a book that I created is an accomplishment of itself. To me, I don't feel accomplished until someone above me tells me that I've accomplished something, like, like a publisher gives me a chance, or someone, really tells me I don't know, something that's out of reach at the moment. But putting that aside, the realistic part of it is just creating something is very difficult, and it's more than, say, 8 out of 10 people do. Everyone can have an idea, everyone can start an idea, but if you just keep doing it, I'm not a prolific writer by any stretch. I don't I write kind of slow, and I rewrite a lot, and it takes me a long time to get through all this stuff to a point where I think that it's worth releasing. And so I think the best advice is the most generic of, like, if you have an idea of something that you want to create, just spend a little time every day. Don't get worried about how much it is, and don't be mad at yourself if you drop it for a week and come back to it. Just chip away at it one step at a time, and you're going to get to the end of it, and then you're going to be able to do something with that. And if it's in comics, you know, and you're like me, just a writer, if you're young enough and you're ambitious enough, I would say learn to draw, because that will make it way cheaper. But at the same time, there's a huge community of collaborators and people who love comics and people who are fantastic artists who don't want to write or don't have that skill and want to collaborate with you. And so it is certainly possible. It's just a matter of, again, chipping away every single day and just making the thing, you know. No one's going to stop you from doing that, you know.
J. Michael Miller over on YouTube just got you another follow. Thank you, J. Michael Miller.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much.
From what I read, you will love this book. I think that's going to be right up your alley. So, man, what an awesome piece of advice, too. That chip away method is kind of what I do, you know, a little behind the scenes with Comic Book Yeti. Sometimes I'll get a review. And sometimes, you know, knocking out a review, it can very well take 4 to 6 hours, you know, like reading it, dissecting it. And then giving your thoughts, and sometimes that could be a heavy load. So breaking off just a little chunk here and there. It's like that quote: you get an axe, you big tree, you chop 5 swings a day, and that tree is eventually going to fall down. So you just got to keep swinging.
And it's not like, you know, I'm not one of those people that believes in what the hustle culture. I even hate the name of it. But like, people are like, you've got to be doing it every single minute of every day. I don't think that's the case at all. I think you got to live your life and you've got to cut yourself some slack. As long as you're doing it at some point, every step of doing something is getting you towards the end goal, you know. And then once you actually have one in your hand, you're going to want to do more, I think.
Oh, absolutely. That is an awesome piece of advice. Everyone, right there is the pre-launch campaign link. Again, be sure to check it out. If you can't follow for whatever reason, share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter. Word of mouth is 100% free. Let's get some more followers for this campaign. With that being said, it is a lovely Monday night. I hope you all have an awesome one, but most importantly, keep it geekly.